If you're planning to buy a home in 2026, you're going to hear a lot of chatter about compensation and who pays the buyer's agent. For years, most buyers never really thought about it because behind the scenes, the seller usually paid the compensation for both the listing agent and the buyer's agent. But after recent lawsuits, the national settlement with the National Association of Realtors, and new laws in California, that has changed. Today, if you're buying in California, you are front and center in the conversation about how your agent gets paid, and you are usually the one who is contractually responsible for that fee, even if we successfully negotiate for the seller to cover it. In this video, I'm going to break down what changed and why, what it means for you as a California buyer, the different ways a buyer's agent can be paid, and why having your own representation is still one of the smartest financial decisions you can make. Quick note, this is education, not legal advice. Always review your actual forms and agreements with your agent and talk to an attorney if you need legal guidance. What changed? Old world versus new world. Let's start with the before and after. Before 2024-2025, sellers typically signed a listing agreement that built in a total amount of compensation. Part of that total was offered through the MLS to pay a buyer's agent. As a buyer, you didn't usually see a separate line item for your agent. It looked free, even though it was baked into the price. After a series of compensated related lawsuits and a national settlement, several big shifts kicked in. MLSs that followed the National Association of Realtors rules stopped allowing offers of compensation to buyer's agents to be displayed on the MLS. Sellers can still choose to pay a buyer's agent, but it now has to be negotiated off the MLS. For example, in the purchase agreement or separate documents. Buyers now sign a written buyer representation agreement that clearly spells out what their agent will do and how that agent will be compensated. So instead of the seller quietly deciding how much your agent will be paid, you and your agent talk about that up front, and then we go to the seller together and negotiate. The California twist: new laws for 2025. Let's zoom in on California because we have a few extra layers here. Starting January 1st, 2025, California law requires that for a buyer's broker to receive compensation in a real estate sale, there must be a written buyer-broker representation agreement in place. What that means in plain English: if you want a California buyer's agent to represent you and get paid, you will be asked to sign a buyer representation and broker compensation agreement, often called the BRBC, a standard form created by the California Association of Realtors. The agreement says what services your agent will provide, how long the agreement lasts, and how your agent will be compensated, including what happens if the seller pays some or all of that amount. The California Department of Real Estate has been very clear. After these changes, buyers and their agents negotiate compensation directly, and then buyers have options. They can pay their agent out of pocket. They can ask the seller to pay some or all of it as a concession in the purchase agreement, or if that doesn't work for them, they can choose not to move forward on that property and look for one where the numbers make more sense. So in 2026, when you work with a buyer's agent in California, expect to sign a written agreement before you go too far, often before touring homes and definitely before writing an offer. Is hiring a buyer's agent still worth it? Now let's tackle the big question. If I'm the one on the hook for this, is hiring a buyer's agent really worth it? Short answer: if you choose the right agent, yes, and the data backs that up. On the seller side, we've known for years that using an agent pays off. According to the National Association of Realtors profile for home buyers and sellers, over the past year, homes sold for sale by owner had a significantly lower median price than agent-assisted sales. So if professional representation can make that kind of a difference for a seller's bottom line, imagine the impact it can have for you as a buyer, protecting you from overpaying in a shifting market, catching issues that could cost you thousands down the road, structuring your offer so you actually win the home you want, negotiating credits and terms that directly reduce your out-of-pocket cost. A lot of buyers who try to go it alone think they're saving money. In reality, without a pro on their side, many end up paying more than they needed to, missing out on better suited homes, or walking into legal and inspection surprises that are far more expensive than an agent's compensation. In other words, it's often a false saving. What a great buyer's agent does for you. So what are you actually paying for? Let me walk you through what a great buyer's agent does in a typical California purchase. 1, strategic prep and affordability. Connects you with a reputable lender so you truly understand your numbers. Helps you get clear on your must-haves, nice-to-haves, and deal breakers. Make sure you're not shopping Mercedes on a Kia budget or undershooting what you can actually afford. 2, neighborhood and property research. Pre-screens homes so you're not wasting weekends in the wrong places. Helps you understand the data on schools, commute patterns, crime stats, local amenities, and future developments. Spots red flags in photos, disclosures, and public records before you fall in love. 3, offers strategy and compensation negotiation. Analyzing recent comparable sales and current competition to recommend a smart offer price and terms. Calls the listing agent to understand the seller's priorities, the timing, the rent backs, repairs, flexibilities. Ask up front if the seller is open to contributing to the buyer broker's compensation or closing costs and structures your offer accordingly. 4, negotiation. Price, terms, and fees. Presents your offer and negotiates not just on the price, but on the repairs and the credits, on the rent backs, on the timelines, and yes, who pays what in terms of compensation. The listing agent is hired to protect the seller's interest. Your agent's job is to protect yours. It's like a friendly but serious boxing match where each side has their own coach in their corner. 5, managing the entire escrow process. Coordinate inspections, roof, home, pest, sewer, pool, septic, whatever's appropriate. Reviews disclosures, reports, and the title file with you and flags potential problems. Stays on top of your lender, appraiser, escrow, and all paperwork deadlines. Negotiates again if issues come up, maybe a credit instead of a repair or a price adjustment if something major is discovered. And here's a really important point. Your agent doesn't get paid a dime until you've successfully closed on a home. In most cases, we've put dozens or even hundreds of hours into your search, analysis, showings, negotiations, and escrow before any compensation happens at all. How this plays out in real life. Simple scenarios. Let me walk you through 3 quick examples of how buyer compensation might look in 2026. Scenario 1, seller pays it all. You and I sign a buyer representation agreement where my compensation is say X or a flat dollar amount. On a specific home, we write your offer asking the seller to pay that full amount as part of the deal. The seller agrees. At closing, my compensation is paid from the seller's proceeds and you don't pay anything additional out of pocket for my compensation. Scenario 2, seller pays part, you pay part. Same agreement, same compensation. On this home, the seller agrees to cover part of it as a concession. The rest is paid from your side at closing, just like any other closing cost. We decide together whether that still makes sense within your budget. Scenario 3, competitive offer, you choose to cover it. In a multiple offer situation, we decide that asking the seller to pay your agent might weaken your offer. You choose to cover the compensation yourself so your offer is cleaner and more attractive. We build that into your numbers up front so there are no surprises. In all 3 scenarios, you and I have talked about this in advance. It's in writing. You know the maximum amount I can receive, and you know how we're going to try to structure it. So if you're planning to buy a home in California in 2026, here's the big picture. You'll have a written agreement with your agent that explains exactly what they'll do and how they'll be paid. You'll be ultimately responsible for that compensation, but you'll also have several ways to negotiate for the seller to cover some or all of it. And when you choose the right agent, you're not just paying for help filling out forms, you're paying for strategy, protection, negotiation power, and peace of mind. If you'd like to see how this would look for you in your price range and situation, here's your next step. Send me a message with the words Buyer Comp 2026. I'll walk you through the exact agreement, show you example numbers, and help you see how we can structure things so that you're protected, prepared, and confident before you ever write an offer. You deserve to understand exactly what you're paying for and how having the right buyer's agent in your corner can more than pay for itself.